There isn't anything obviously connecting Amphibia to Outer Wilds. On the surface, the two have practically nothing in common. One of them's a Disney Channel TV show about talking frogs, and the other is a video game where you fly a spaceship and explore your solar system. They have different tones, different styles, different intended demographics. Pretty much any way you can think to compare two pieces of media, they look completely different. That's why I was surprised when in the days after I watched the Amphibia finale, I found myself feeling the same way that I did after I'd finished Outer Wilds months before. It could have just been that I liked them both a lot, and I was just putting them in the mental category of things that are neat. But I couldn't help but feel like there was something deeper that I was missing. Some connection between the two that was causing my mind to go to the same places when I thought about either one. That weird feeling of familiarity stuck with me for a bit, until I eventually figured out what caused it. From a certain perspective, Outer Wilds and Amphibia actually have very similar endings despite all of the differences between them. They both have a similar thematic message at their core, and they both communicate that message in what is my personal favorite style of ending. Once I made the connection, I just couldn't get the thought out of my head. It's been this idea that'll pop up without warning while I'm at work or eating dinner, or desperately trying to fall asleep because I have to wake up at 6 a.m. tomorrow, but for some reason I just can't stop thinking about that frog show, and I just want to go to sleep, and why could your brain even do this? Eventually, it got to the point that I thought, you know what would be a great idea? I'm going to make a video about this so that I can infect everyone else's brain with it too. So here I am, rotting your brain by showing you the connection between some of my favorite pieces of unrelated media in recent memory. So despite the relative popularity of both of these things, I have a suspicion that there aren't a huge number of people who are fans of both. So before I get too far, it's worth gushing about them for a bit in a spoiler-free way before I irreparably destroy your ability to experience them for the first time yourself. I don't want to spend too long here though. My goal is really just to give you just enough information to decide whether or not you want to play the game or watch the show yourself before you watch this video. I don't plan on giving you all the context that leads to the endings, and I'm not going to try to explain what it's like to experience these stories for the first time, because I want you to see them for yourself. Instead, this will be just a small bit of information about what it is and why I like it, before we get into the big stuff. Amphibia is an animated show about a girl named Anne who gets stranded in an alternate dimension filled with talking frogs and giant insects eager to eat her. The show follows her as she befriends one of the frogs named Sprig, crashes in his family's basement for a while, and eventually tries to find her friends, who are transported along with her and are dealing with their own issues, before finally returning home. The show spends a lot of time showing Anne's struggle to adjust to life in Amphibia, and overall is a pretty fun and laid-back comedy. Except when it isn't. I don't think the show's perfect for everyone. There are multiple large sections where the plot moves a bit too slowly for my taste, especially near the beginning. There's a few places where I can't help but feel like the writers lost track of the consequences of some of their characters' actions, and there are definitely aspects that make it clear that the show was written with younger children intended to be its primary audience. That said, the show contains some of my favorite episodes of TV ever. Its season finales in particular consistently amaze me with how well every aspect of the narrative and characters support each other and mesh together to create a cohesive message. The show has a few high-intensity moments that I'm genuinely surprised were allowed to air on Disney Channel, and they were absolutely shocking to see for the first time, even though I had one of them spoiled for me before I even started watching the show. It grows into a great example of how to do long-form storytelling with complex characters over an extended time period that stands alongside other greats like Avatar or Gravity Falls. There are a lot of moments that make the show enjoyable as a comedic adventure between friends, and they're all supported by a core narrative and character arcs that are very well thought out and come together to create some fantastic, heartfelt, and dramatic moments that have stuck in my mind long after the show ended. It's ultimately those moments rattling around in my brain for the last few weeks that convinced me to make this video, which I think is at least a little bit indicative of the show's quality given how frequently I upload and how different this is from the things that I've made in the past. The payoffs in the show are well worth the time investment, and I will generally recommend it to most people, even if you're like me and struggle to get into it at first and have to power through the slower sections. Outer Wilds is best experienced with absolutely no knowledge about the game going in. If you've ever had even the slightest inkling that you might want to try it and haven't done so yet for whatever reason, I highly recommend that you just stop the video right now and go play the game. I've yet to hear of someone having a negative opinion after finishing it, and it seems like the most common emotion among fans is a profound sadness that they'll never be able to play it again for the first time. This is a truly special game that loses something important to the experience once you learn too much about it, so anyone with plans to play it should go out of their way to avoid even minor spoilers. I've been careful to avoid saying too much about it up to this point, and I'll continue to do so until the spoiler warning later, because I know that there will still be people watching who are unconvinced. For those people, I'll try and give a bit of actual information to help you make the decision without spoiling anything too significant. Outer Wilds is best described as a space mystery and archaeology game. You play as the newest astronaut in your species' emerging spaceflight program, which is currently supported entirely by a single launch tower that may or may not be flammable, located in the middle of a village made entirely of wood. Notably, you're the first person to be equipped with a translator capable of reading the text that's scattered around the ruins left behind by the advanced species called the Nomai that populated your solar system before you. The game is very open-ended and lets you do pretty much whatever you want after a brief introduction, so at this point you're free to fly to whatever planet or structure catches your eye. As you explore, you'll find yourself drawn into learning more about the Nomai both as individuals and as a civilization, learning more about their personalities and their goals, and you'll find yourself compelled to solve the mysteries that have been hiding in plain sight as you uncover their messages left to each other. I would recommend Outer Wilds to practically anybody that is able to play the game, regardless of their previous experience level, skills, or preferences about games. This is not a game that requires a player to be particularly skilled, and it doesn't lock progression through traditional game mechanisms like unlocking an ability or completing a difficult task. It's instead a game that rewards your curiosity and investment into the world that it's designed. In fact, there is absolutely nothing stopping you from opening the game for the first time and going straight to the end, other than the fact that at the start you have no idea what that even means, let alone how to do it. When you do eventually reach the ending, you'll find a conclusion that pulls together the events you experience into a profound message that resonates with many long after the game is over. Outer Wilds is a game that is extremely good for many reasons, most of which I couldn't possibly hope to talk about in a single video, and it provides almost no reason to dislike it, other than the fact that it takes a surprisingly strong and incorrect stance on the proper way to cook a marshmallow. Seriously, if that thing is not crispy from being shoved directly into the base of the fire, then you are doing it wrong. If my word means anything to you, then please trust me that this game is worth the time and effort to play it blind. With that out of the way, it's time to move on to the main point of this video, which means that this is the final spoiler warning. I feel obligated to implore you one last time to do these things yourself if you haven't already. I realize that by asking people to go spend 20 hours watching an entire show or playing an entire game, there's a good chance that many just won't watch past this point of the video, but I honestly just don't care. I really like these things, and I think more people should get the chance to see them for themselves. Everything past this point assumes that you know how both Amphibia and the base game of Outer Wilds end, and discussion of anything about them is fair game. I will spoil pretty much everything about their endings, and will make absolutely no effort to hide it. You have been warned. Finishing a story is always a bit of a process for me. I rarely know how I feel about an ending until I've had a couple days to process what happened and figure out how everything fits into the larger story. I'll often make a conscious effort to keep the ending in the back of my mind and keep track of how my thoughts evolve during those couple days, because a large part of how much I end up enjoying an ending comes from how my understanding of it changes over time. Amphibia and Outer Wilds stand out in my mind in this regard because they have spectacular and shockingly similar endings, despite the surface-level differences between them. The core thematic message behind both is a bittersweet lesson about accepting change as an inevitable part of life and understanding that even though it might be painful to lose what you've grown to love, by embracing that change you can come out the other end with something even better by building on what you've experienced and learned along the way. Each ending expresses this message in a slightly different manner, but the emotional journey that you take along the way is structured the same. For each, that journey begins with an extreme dose of sadness. In Amphibia, this comes from having to watch the main trio say goodbye to their friends for the last time. There's no ambiguity, there's no uncertainty, there's no coming back, no way to return from this decision. This is their final decision in Amphibia. Once Anne and her friends step through the portal to go back to Earth, they will never see this dimension or anyone in it ever again. The characters know this, the viewers know this, and the writers make no effort to hide it. This is the moment that the show has been building to from the very beginning, the inevitable conclusion to a fantastical journey that has always been about saving your friends and getting everybody home. Watching this scene, it's impossible to not feel the same sadness that the characters show. As the characters say their goodbyes and the portal shuts behind them, you feel the loss of everyone present as though it were your own, because you can't help but think of all the moments you got to share with them throughout the last 3 seasons. There won't be any more Spran against the world, no more pseudo-parental relationship between Grime and Sasha, no chance for Marcy to grow closer with Olivia and Yunnan, or get closure on what might have even been sympathy towards Andreas. This is it. This is the end. It's finally over. I know there are some people who don't like this ending, but in my opinion, a complete separation like this is the only way to bring full closure to this type of story. Anything less would undermine the emotional weight that this scene carries, and any way for the characters to wiggle around the sudden cutoff from their lives and friends in Amphibia would only lessen the impact of this moment. With the finale, Amphibia recognizes that in order to elicit extreme emotions from its viewers, it needs to commit to extreme consequences. This decision, and other similar ones throughout the series, are some of the main reasons that I like the show as much as I do, and I think they're a vital part of why this show resonates with so many. Outer Wilds takes that same idea of extreme consequences as far as it can possibly go. You have lived your life up to this point with the dream of becoming an astronaut and exploring the stars, only for your own to violently destroy the world a mere 22 minutes after you launch for the first time. As your death approaches in loop after loop, you can watch the other star systems explode in the distance, exterminating everything around them one by one. I figure that some of those stars have to contain life that you never get to see, maybe similar to yourself, maybe the other Nomai clans that you can see conversing over the connection that the vessel maintained when it crashed, maybe something unlike anything that you could ever consider. Whatever the case, they're gone now. By the end of the game, everyone's dead, possibly even including yourself, because you are literally living at the end of the universe. You're eventually forced to abandon your solar system. Despite all you've learned, there is no way for you or the Nomai to prevent the oncoming supernova. The game lets you stand by and watch as your star peacefully explodes in the distance. There's no fanfare as it happens. You can't hear the boom that normally accompanies the start of the explosion. The power core that you put in the vessel isn't in the Ashtwin project, and so there's no time loop to reset everything. Depending on how you view the situation, you've effectively just killed your entire species, saving only yourself. Assuming, of course, that their previous arrangement could have really been considered living at all. With nothing to do except press onwards, you find yourself at the center of the eye. You fly inside a forest, reminiscent of the ones on your home planet. You fly amongst galaxies, reminiscent of the stars you saw dying in the distance, only this time you can reach them. You fly into one, and it disintegrates into dust. As the universe dies around you and darkness takes its place, you can't help but feel for the loss of your history and progress. The history of the Nomai that faced tragedy and were stranded in your solar system without being able to contact the other clans before being wiped out, and of all the other civilizations that have just casually blinked out of existence without anyone left to remember them. You're helpless to stop the end of the universe. You learned a lot by the end of everything, but in the end, there's nothing you can do but watch as the world ends around you. So, that's all pretty heavy, but it's for a purpose. It's the bitter part of Bittersweet. There's better things to come though, since we're only halfway through. An ending that stops here isn't really a resolution, it isn't closure. It isn't even really an ending, or at least not a good one in my opinion. What we've seen so far is only the setup that lets us pull something meaningful out of what we've just experienced. Amphibia shows its characters growing as a result of their adventure. The amphibians have healed the rifts between them, unifying themselves despite their conflicted history, just like the humans that pulled them together in the first place. They still think about the friends that left them, and they still think about the separation, but they're clearly able to move on and have continued to grow because of the time that they shared together. They're glad that they met their friends from another world, and will keep their memories alive by living out new journeys inspired by the old ones, even though the people themselves are gone. Back on Earth, The humans have kept the lessons they learned and used them to guide themselves as they mature and figure out who they really want to be. They're no longer the calamity trio destined to save the world, and are instead able to use their return to normal life to focus on themselves. The changes they originally ran from finally manifest themselves as Marcy moves away and Anne and Sasha become increasingly distant, but the lessons they learned from each other stick around and change them permanently. The final reunion of the show is one between adults, capable of maintaining a healthy friendship. They might not be as close now as when they were kids, but that's okay. People change, life goes on, and sometimes even the closest friends find themselves moving in different directions. Even though what they had at the start of the show seemed like it made them happy, by embracing the changes in themselves that they discovered in Amphibia and moving on from their past, they come back stronger and happier than would have ever been possible before. Outer Wilds ends with the creation of a new universe, born of what you remember about the old one. As you collect your friends around the campfire and reminisce with one last song, the message is clear that this isn't something to mourn. Everyone you talk to gives off a calming sense of acceptance. Their exact reactions vary depending on the character, ranging from reflections on how the past influences us every day, to happiness that they got to experience the joys that they have so far, to curiosity about what comes next. Sure, the loss of an entire universe is sad, but change often is. It doesn't mean that what's happening is all bad, because from a different frame of mind, that loss isn't as significant as it first appears, and it provides an opportunity to evolve. Sure, the past is past now, but it's never really gone completely. We constantly carry the things we learn with us as we live our lives, and those little lessons and choices pile up to shape the future. The game gives you no opportunity to avert catastrophe and save your universe, but it does provide you with the opportunity to move on, to take what you know and love about the world and use it to shape a new one, to create something that looks different than what you started with, but is still beautiful on its own. 14.3 billion years after the Big Bang, you get to see the new universe. The planets you see are different, but the trees are from your home. The people living on the planet sit around a Hearthian campfire, presumably with your wonder about the natural world, your desire to explore, and the Nomai's curiosity and love of learning. There will still be plenty of challenges ahead of them, but you were able to experience something beautiful while you were alive, so perhaps they will too. As I was writing this script, it struck me how easy it is to imagine swapping the characters around and just how little that actually changes the overall message. It's surprisingly easy to imagine replacing Anne's ending monologue with Rybek's dialogue from the ending campfire. It's easy to imagine Sprig sitting around Outer Wilds' final campfire, a talking frog at the end of the universe wondering why he misses all the people he never got to meet, and hopeful that they'll still get to contribute to whatever comes next. Amphibia and Outer Wilds might not have much obviously in common, but their narratives are both driven by a message encouraging you to embrace the changes in your life as they come. Change often feels scary and overwhelming. It can feel like it's about to destroy the things you've built and the friendships you've made, and can make you do crazy things to avoid it. But it happens to everyone as they grow, and fighting it will only make things harder. Accepting change and understanding that it brings with it opportunity to improve yourself and your experience is at the core of both of these stories. Every time you lose something, there's the promise of beauty and wonder hidden somewhere, and by making the most of your situation and seizing that change, you can overcome the challenges you face and come out the other end stronger than ever before. That doesn't mean that it won't be painful, but sometimes that pain is worth experiencing if the result is something wonderful.